Stuxnet?
Stuxnet is the name of the word. So, apparently in 2009, a very sophisticated, complex attack occurred on Iranian networks. And it was complex because it used 4 different ways of attacking that no one had ever seen before. Now, normally, you see that one time, one new method is used. But this used 4 different methods just to be sure it could get in. That's spending a lot of cyber gold, if you will, because each of these methods can only be used once and then people know about them. Somebody used 4 different methods. They're called zero-day attacks because they've never been seen before. This is the 0 day of their use. 4 zero-day attacks to get in. And then when they got in, the software looked for a particular type of program. It looked for a Siemens, the German electronics company, a Siemens software that ran computer programs telling machines what to do. And in this case, the machines were nuclear centrifuges. And the program only worked on Siemens software, and it only worked on converters for centrifuges made by 2 companies in the world, a company in Finland and a company in Iran. In other words, this was a targeted attack, a guided missile, not a normal computer worm that goes everywhere. This was a guided attack on machines that were making enriched uranium in Iran. It's very hard to identify who's attacking, particularly if they want to fool you, particularly if they want to misguide you. I remember a day when I went to the White House in the morning and the people told me overnight China had attacked the White House web server. And I said, who in China? China's a big place. And they said, well, we'll get back to you by the end of the day. And at the end of the day, they came back to me and said it was a teenage boy in Seattle, Washington. And he had directed his attack through China, so it looked like it was China that was doing it. Spoofing, this is called. And spoofing is done all the time. It's very, very difficult to figure out who is doing the attack.
It's paradoxical that the U.S. has more capability than any other country to do cyber war, but at the same time it's the most vulnerable to cyber war. Why?
So the United States, more so than any other country, has converted its control systems into computer network control systems. So all of our railroads, our metros, our refineries, chemical plants, banking systems, electric power systems are controlled by computer networks. And that means if you can get into them, you can do a lot of damage. And we don't have a system to defend those companies because those are private companies. In the United States, the government doesn't do the banks or the refineries or the pipelines or the power grid. Those are all private companies. And the government has no system, no plan, no capability to defend them. The government is beginning to get a capability to defend itself. So the Pentagon can defend itself. The White House can defend itself. The various ministries are increasing their capability. But for ideological reasons, for legal reasons, the government has no capability and no plan to defend the rest of the country.
How can a nation protect itself from cyber war? For instance, Brazil. Should Brazil be worried?
Well, I think Brazil should be worried about cyber espionage. There are lots of Brazilian technology companies that have intellectual property that are at risk. I think they should be worried about cyber crime, banking accounts, credit card accounts, and that sort of thing. But I don't think Brazil needs to worry about cyber war any more than it needs to worry about war in general. What country is going to go to war with Brazil? Probably never, hopefully. Brazil will be in a war with any of its neighbors. So it's not going to have cyber war directed at it. But as time goes on, these war capabilities are going to start getting down into the hands of criminal cartels and maybe terrorist groups. And you can imagine a criminal cartel perhaps blackmailing someone, saying, if you don't pay us a certain amount of money, we're going to stop the metro. We're going to cause an explosion in the refinery. We're going to turn off the power grid.
But to protect itself, a country has to cut from the internet, access from the internet to parts of its infrastructure?
One way of doing it is to make sure that things like the power grid have no connectivity whatsoever to the internet. Now, they'll tell you, the power companies will tell you, that's already the case.
It's not.
And it's obviously not. And we've demonstrated over and over again that it's not.
Maybe one of the most popular characters in fiction right now is a hacker, Lisbeth Salander from the Millennium Trilogy. Is the government, or are governments all over the world, hiring hackers as cyber warriors?
Yes, they are. In fact, they've been doing it for a very long time. We had a case about 12 years ago where there was an attack on a Pentagon network. We figured out who did it, and it was an Israeli teenager. And we asked the Israelis to arrest this teenager. Instead, they put him into the cyber unit. So yes, it's been going on for a long time.
Is the U.S. hiring cyber warriors?
The United States military is now recruiting through ads people for cyber attacks. I quote in the book, there was one Air Force general who said, we don't need physically fit people anymore. We don't need people who can run 5 miles with a backpack. We need people who can take down an electric power grid.
In your book, Breakpoint, the cyber attacks were led by an American fundamentalist, Christian fundamentalist, funded by a billionaire who was afraid of the takeover of humanity by machines. So it was a domestic scenario. So that could happen?
I think the fundamental theme of the novel Breakpoint is that there's going to be some element in society that will reject the growth in technology. Technology is growing exponentially. Technology builds on itself, and things get faster and faster. And in the course of our lifetime, we're going to see huge advances in biological technology. That's going to upset some people. It's going to change our identity as human beings. It's going to change the fundamental nature of society. So whether it's biological or computer, perhaps the growth of robotics, perhaps the blending of what is human and what is machine. Because we're going to get more and more machines in our bodies.
And interconnected.
And interconnected.
Through the internet or whatever.
Absolutely. Today, we all have our smartphone, our iPhone, or our BlackBerry. We don't have it inside our bodies. We have it strapped to our bodies. But that's already changed. How we act as human beings, how we relate to each other, what we remember, and what we count on computer memory to remember. And more we're seeing artificial parts of our bodies. I think there's going to be, over the next 20 years, a merging of machine and human, and a greater connectivity between the human and the networks. And you're going to get biological engineering. All of this happening at the same time. And some people...
A backlash against that.
Some people will have a backlash against that. And it could be violent, and it could be political.
And it could be also through cyber attacks.
And they could use the very technologies that they object to cause havoc.
You have been warning about cyber war for more than 10 years now. Is there a sense of deja vu that, again, like you did warn against Al-Qaeda, nobody heard it?
Well, you know, Cassandra in Greek mythology was gifted by the gods to see the future and condemned by the gods to be ignored by everybody. So I hope I'm not Cassandra. I hope I'm not going to be ignored.
Is it more rewarding to write policy books about cyber war or the novels that you are writing? Are you planning to write more novels than non-fiction?
Well, you know, fiction's often...
What is more rewarding?
Fiction's a lot easier to write. A book like this takes a lot of research. And fiction, well, it takes some research. You can make things up in fiction. And it's more fun to write. So I think I'll be doing both in the future.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.